So, human rights in China, or really the lack thereof. A man who used his mobile phone to film a violent clash between villagers and officials in rural China was beaten to death by public order enforcers, Chinese state media reported yesterday, bringing more unwanted attention to the country's unruly hinterlands. So that was from WordPress.com. And this picture over here that you can see, if you can't read it, says China's getting ready. And then the little symbol that it kind of has in the corner is barbed wire. That would be out of jail, but it's in the shape of the Olympic rings. And it says Beijing 2008. And I just wanted to start off the presentation with this because this kind of, using a mobile phone to film police brutality pretty much is exactly what you can compare to America and how we actually have the ability to do that here and say, hey, we don't think this is right, and post it places and spread the word, whereas you see how quickly in China this is beaten down. He probably didn't even have time to send that anywhere. So, let's get started. So human rights in China, not only are protesters and people openly speaking out against the government being jailed, but also lawyers and just moderate critics who are trying to find less confrontational ways to kind of push back against the government. They're also being jailed because the Chinese government's trying to limit all ways that people could be promoting change, all the little loopholes and stuff. So, the Chinese Constitution, made in 1982, guarantees freedom of association and assembly, and it guarantees citizens freedom of expression and of the press, even though it says we have to stick to the four basic principles of the Communist Party's leadership. So that's socialism, dictatorship of the proletariat, communist leadership, and Marxist-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought. So within those, there's freedom of expression, freedom of the press, association, and assembly. So let's start with assembly and expression. Only organizations that the government have checked off and approved are allowed to exist. So any organization that's not registered with the government is considered illegal. So that means anybody who's trying to advocate for labor, human rights, environment, developmental or political issues is illegal because anybody protesting isn't going to be approved by the government. So any groups that the government doesn't say, okay, we're allowing you to say only these certain things, they're automatically illegal and are vulnerable to jail time or getting attacked by any of the official enforcers. So then, after Tiananmen Square in 1993, the state security law was created, and it says that it's illegal to get funding from any hostile supranational organizations. So if you are getting funding from even the UN or something, you are free game for the Chinese enforcers. It is illegal to publish any written or verbal speeches that might endanger state security and to use religion to carry out any activities that might endanger state security. Which is really honestly crazy for us to think about because we do live in the land of freedom and are allowed to write and publish whatever we want, practice whatever religion we want, and it's really, really heavily limited in China, and pretty much there's no real kind of federal regulation on it. It's all left up to local government, so it's pretty much left to the discretion and decision making of security officials. So if they see you practicing some kind of religion in the street, or if they see something you've posted somewhere near your house or published online, they're allowed to come find you as fast as they want and beat you down. And even if you just say something that piss them off, they could say, oh no, they were speaking out against the government. They have all of the power. And I mean, that's what makes the Chinese government so powerful. We talked about this. The one word that describes government is control, and they have serious control over individual expression. Okay, torture. While imprisoned, if this woman over here, who has her arms behind her back getting taken away, if she was put in jail, and in prison, torture that she could go through there could include beating with electric batons, rubber truncheons on the hands and feet, long periods in handcuffs or leg irons that are like super tight so they hurt a lot, and restrictions on food, and long periods in solitary confinement, which can cause mental suffering. And sometimes guards and correctional officers are known to like force the prisoner's family to give a bunch of money, but then they only give the prisoners the like daily food and medical expenses that the state taxes will pay for, and they'll just keep the money. So not only are they beating these prisoners, but they're super corrupt at the same time. And so, we'd expect international organizations in powerful countries such as America to try to deal with this extreme corruption and be like, you can't do that to your citizens. But the Chinese government just absolutely refuses to allow any organizations or even just groups within China to visit their prisons, and they often refuse to open investigations on deaths that happen in prisons, and they won't even let the families see the autopsy reports of the people who've died. So if your daughter died in a prison somewhere and it was a little bit shady or sketchy, like the situation, you might not even be able allowed to see the report. Okay, so women. The Chinese Constitution and other laws provide equal rights for equal rights for men and women completely. So ownership of property, inheritance, educational opportunities, but we know from history that women are a lot less valued in the Chinese society. So domestic violence is really, really prevalent in China. And honestly, it's socially acceptable. It's expected to happen. And women can't get out of domestic violence and like go to a women's shelter, for battered wives, because those just don't exist in China. That's not a thing. For people can't just escape to these kind of non-government organizations because they literally would be illegal. Also, each year, many, many women are sold into prostitution and then like shipped to Southeast Asia to become prostitutes there, rather than in the same cities where they're abducted, and actually often also sold into marriage. And so no one will be persecuted or prosecuted for domestic violence or for selling women unless a victim steps up. So like even if officials caught a man abducting women and selling them into marriage or selling them into the sex trafficking, they wouldn't be persecuted unless a victim stepped forward and like put all these charges against them. But then if the victim threatened and like withdraws all her accusations, they won't carry the court case forward. They'll just forget about it. Unless the victim like really pushes and testifies, they'll forget about it. And officials are even like known to register marriages even if they know the woman has been sold into the marriage. So really, although men and women have like a lot of the same rights technically in the Constitution, we can see that, through assembly and expression, through torture, and now through women, the Constitution's being completely disregarded because there's such like an intense corruption of power and who gets to use it and to what extremity. And then this picture over here says no torture, no secret prisons, no detention without legal process. And pretty much what happens is that people will get pulled, they'll get accused of a political crime and speaking out against the government, but then they won't be given due process and properly tried. And a lot of times they'll say, what happened in the trial? And a vague response will be given, and the people won't even have been normally tried. They'll have been automatically assumed guilty. Okay, one child policy. So to pretty much it was as the one child policy was put in place to, and I know someone else is talking about this, but it was put in place to kind of control the number. Like it was an overpopulation problem, so they said each couple can only have one kid. So to motivate people, it was, and again, not a federal thing. It's left up to local governments and local officials to enforce these things, which leaves a lot of gaps for these people to really take advantage of the power that they have. So, to motivate people, local authorities offer medical, educational, and housing benefits to people who follow the rules. You know, if you follow the rules, we'll make sure that your one child gets a good education and that you have somewhere to live, and that your medical expenses, that you have access to doctors and stuff. But as a punishment, if people don't follow the policy, and they can even get you fired from your job if you have too many kids, and therefore you won't be able to pay for those kids. Also, they can refuse to give like residence cards to the second or third children, to these out of plan children, they're called. So pretty much your first child is going to be given a residency card, like saying they live in China. It's like an ID. But your second child, if the official is not liking you, they can say no, they don't get one. You broke the rules. You don't get a residency card. That kid can be denied educational rights, or they can be denied an education and other state benefits. So, I mean, they won't be covered for their medical expenses. They won't have any kind of help or coverage from state payment. Also, this law leads to female infanticide, which we've talked about a little bit before, and it's true. This is seriously decreased in recent years, and is just really socially less acceptable. But I mean, women are not valued the same as men in a Chinese society. So that means that a lot of times girls, if they're not killed as infants, they will be sent off, just left abandoned somewhere, but without registration. So they won't even know who they are. And if someone found them, they wouldn't have a residency card, an ID card. So no one would know who they are, where they belong. Also, this led to a lot of forced abortions, and a lot of women would get abortions if they knew their child was going to be female, because nobody wants a daughter, they all want a son. And a lot of the orphanages consist of unregistered girls and also children who have physical and mental handicaps. And that's the other thing, is they'll leave those kids too, because if you can only have one kid, you want the smartest, brightest, most capable child possible. And someone with a physical and mental handicap isn't always going to be the top of the class, the top of everything. And along with the one-child policy, a lot of women are forced to get sterilized, and that would be women who've already had one kid or who have mental illness or a hereditary disease. They say, yeah, you are not allowed to reproduce. Sorry, you can only have one kid, and you don't want that to be messed up. And actually, in Tibet, I know somebody else is talking. Maybe somebody's talking about Tibet. I'm not sure, but in Tibet, you're allowed to have more than one kid. But recently, they've been kind of cracking down, since they're really upset with all the protests that have been going on in Tibet. They've been cracking down and forcibly sterilizing women who've already had one child. So, human rights in China is a huge international issue, and the Chinese government is really, really closed to talking to other countries about this, and talking to the UN and Amnesty International specifically. So, the HRIC is a human rights in China group, and pretty much it's a group working with the UN and with Amnesty International, as you see in this picture over here, that pretty much promote human rights and then the protection of those rights. So that's really difficult, especially since all groups and organizations have to be kind of verified and approved by the government first. So in a way, I would say, China wants to approve this and be like, absolutely, we have a group that is fighting for human rights. That's awesome. We want everybody knowing what's going on inside, because when you have control over something, if all your little secrets or not so little secrets get out, all of a sudden you have a very corrupt, overexposed government, and that's dangerous for the people who are in charge. So all in all, China's human rights are absolutely terrifying, and control is absolutely the word I would use to describe the Chinese government and how they handle things. And it's something to absolutely watch out for in the news, because there are still human rights violations going on every single day. Not only in China, in our country too, and in countries all around the world, not to be mistaken, but China's on such a huge scale. Like we said before, assembly and expression, torture, women, one child policies. I mean, it just extends to every part of life, which is absolutely terrifying. And yeah, so I think that's something we might want to keep an eye out for in the news. And that's my bibliography. So, woo, thank you.